The Great Hall of Ithara Prime was the largest room Daniel Price had ever seen. It stretched upward for nearly a mile, its walls made of crystal that glowed with soft blue light. 12 massive chairs sat in a circle at the center, each one built for a different species. Some were filled with water. Others burned with fire. One was nothing but a cloud of gas held in place by invisible forces. Daniel stood in the middle of the circle. He was 63 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes. He had spent 30 years as a diplomat, and 20 of those years had been spent trying to get humanity a seat in this room. Today, he would finally get his answer. The Sithara counselor spoke first. His name was Vreth, and he looked like a giant snake covered in silver scales. His voice was cold and smooth, like ice sliding across glass. The council has considered the human petition for full membership, Vreth said. We have studied your species for 3 decades. We have watched you work in our stations, fight in our wars, and build on our worlds. Daniel waited. He had learned long ago that patience was the most important tool a diplomat could have. The council has voted, Vreth continued. The result is 11-1 against. Humanity is denied full membership status. The words hit Daniel like a punch to the chest, but he did not let his face show anything. He had expected this. He had hoped for something different, but he had expected this. May I ask the reason? Daniel said. His voice was calm and polite. Vreth's snake-like face twisted into something that might have been a smile. Your species is too young, too aggressive, too unpredictable. You have been useful workers and soldiers, but you are not ready to sit among the elder races. Around the circle, other counselors nodded. The Methrony representative, a being made of living crystal, clicked in agreement. The Velfari ambassador, who looked like a tall plant with eyes, rustled its leaves in approval. Only one counselor had voted in favor of humanity. She was a Tazari, a small creature with 4 arms and large black eyes. Her name was Yenna, and she had worked with humans for many years. She looked at Daniel with something like sadness in her eyes, but she said nothing. Daniel took a deep breath. He had prepared for this moment. He had written speeches and arguments. He had gathered evidence of human achievements. He had practiced what he would say to change their minds. But standing here now, looking at these ancient beings who saw his entire species as nothing more than useful tools, Daniel realized something important. He did not want to beg. He did not want to argue. He did not want to prove that humans were worthy of respect, because humans did not need to prove anything to anyone. I understand, Daniel said. I will inform Earth of your decision. The counselors looked surprised. They had expected anger. They had expected pleading. They had not expected quiet acceptance. Daniel pulled out a small communication device and sent a single coded message. It was only 3 words. Begin Operation Homecoming. Then he looked up at the council and spoke the last words he would ever say in this chamber. We wish you well, counselors. He turned and walked out of the great hall. His footsteps echoed in the silence. Vreth watched him go with a satisfied expression. Finally, he said, perhaps now we can focus on more important matters. The council moved on to other business. They did not think about humanity again for many months. They should have. Across the galaxy, a message spread through every human colony, station, and ship. It was simple and clear. Come home. Pack your things. Finish your current tasks. And prepare to leave. Admiral Katie Marsh received the message on her warship. The Iron Will. She was 45 years old, with short brown hair and a scar across her left cheek. She had spent 20 years defending Council space from pirates, invaders, and threats that most species did not even know existed. She read the message twice. Then she called her crew together. The Council has made its decision, she said. We are going home." Her officers looked at each other with mixed emotions. Some were angry. Some were relieved. Some were sad. Commander Ben Torres, her second-in-command, spoke up. "What about our current mission? We are supposed to patrol the Carvex border for another 6 months. The Council will have to find someone else to patrol it," Katie said. "We are done here." On 100 different worlds, similar scenes played out. Human scientists closed their laboratories. Human engineers put down their tools. Human doctors finished treating their current patients and then packed their bags. On Tessix 4, a farming colony, a human engineer named Paul Rivera spent his last day teaching Valkyrie workers how to maintain the irrigation systems he had built. They listened politely but did not take notes. They assumed the machines would run forever. Paul knew better, but he said nothing. He had tried to warn them many times before. They never listened. On Station Kesher 7, a human teacher named Grace Patterson said goodbye to her Methrone students. Many of them cried. One small child, a girl named Talia, held onto Grace's hand and asked her not to go. "I have to," Grace said softly, "but I will always remember you." In the Orion Nebula, human research teams abandoned projects that had taken decades to build. They deleted sensitive data and powered down equipment. They left behind notes explaining how everything worked, but they knew that no one would read them. Within 72 hours, the largest peaceful movement of people in galactic history was underway. Millions of humans boarded transport ships. Families gathered their belongings. Soldiers requested transfer orders. The Council watched this happen with a mixture of relief and amusement. Good riddance, they thought. Humans had always been difficult. They asked too many questions. They complained too much. They did not know their place. Let them go back to their little planet at the edge of the galaxy. Let them build their primitive civilization far away from the civilized races. The galaxy would be better without them. Ambassador. Daniel Price was the last human to leave Ithara Prime. He stood at the window of his shuttle and looked back at the great station one final time. Do you think they understand what they have done? His assistant, a young woman named Sophie Bell, asked. Daniel shook his head slowly. No, but they will. The shuttle turned away from the station and jumped into hyperspace. Behind them, the lights of Ithara Prime grew smaller and smaller until they disappeared completely. The Council did not notice. They were too busy celebrating. They would not celebrate for much longer. 6 months passed, and the galaxy began to fall apart. It started slowly, with small problems that no one thought were important. A broken pipe here. A failed generator there. Little things that used to get fixed within hours now took weeks to repair. Sometimes they did not get fixed at all. On Tessix 4, the farming world where Paul Rivera had once worked, the irrigation systems stopped working on a Tuesday morning. The Valkyrie farmers gathered around the control panel and stared at the flashing red lights. They pressed buttons. They pulled levers. Nothing happened. Someone called the maintenance team, the farm manager said. But there was no maintenance team. The humans had built these systems, and the humans were gone. The Valkyrie had never learned how they worked. They had never needed to learn. The humans always fixed everything. Within 3 days, the crops began to die. Within 2 weeks, half the fields were brown and dead. Within a month, Tessix 4 sent its first distress signal to the Council, requesting emergency food supplies. Council of Wrath received the message and frowned. This was not supposed to happen. The humans had only been gone for 6 months. How could things fall apart so quickly? He sent a team of Sithara engineers to investigate. They arrived on Tessix 4 and looked at the irrigation systems. The machines were unlike anything they had ever seen. Human engineers had built them from parts of 3 different alien technologies, combined in ways that should not have worked but somehow did. The Sithara engineers. spent 2 weeks trying to understand the systems. In the end, they gave up and ordered new machines from a factory on a distant world. The new machines would take 8 months to arrive. By then, most of the crops would be gone. Similar problems appeared everywhere. In the Orion Nebula, a research station went dark. The station was built for oxygen-breathing species, but it sat in a cloud of methane gas. Human engineers had created a cooling system that kept the methane from destroying the oxygen generators. Without humans to maintain it, the cooling system failed. The station overheated. Decades of scientific research were lost in a single fire. On Station Kesher 7, the medical center ran out of a common medicine used to treat Methrony children. Human doctors had manufactured the medicine locally, using a process they had invented themselves. No one else knew how to make it. The station had to import the medicine from a planet 3 months away. By the time it arrived, 17 children had died. Commander Ben Torres heard about these disasters from his position on the human colony ship Wanderer. He sat in the communications room and listened to Council news broadcasts, his face growing darker with each report. His communications officer, Lieutenant Megan Shaw, sat beside him. She was 28 years old, with red hair and freckles across her nose. She had served in the Council Navy for 6 years before the Exodus. "They are calling it a temporary adjustment period," Megan said, reading from a newsfeed. "The Council says everything will return to normal within a year." "They are lying to themselves," Ben said. "We did more than they ever realized. We held their civilization together with tape and wire and hope. And they never even noticed." On the border worlds, the situation was even worse. The Garvex Dominion was an empire of warriors who had wanted to conquer Council space for centuries. The only thing stopping them was a network of patrol ships and defense stations along the border. Humans had built most of these stations. Humans had piloted most of these ships, but now the stations sat empty. The ships were gone. The border was a line on a map and nothing more. Pirate attacks increased by 300% in the first 2 months. Trade ships refused to travel without heavy escorts. The Sitharan Navy tried to fill the gap, but they were a peacekeeping force, not a military one. They did not know how to fight the way humans did. Admiral Katie Marsh watched all of this from the edge of known space. Her fleet had traveled far from Council territory, setting up new colonies on worlds that no other species wanted. The planets were cold or hot or had bad air, but humans did not mind. They were used to making do with what they had. Katie stood on the bridge of the Iron Will and looked at a map of Council space. Red dots marked places where problems had been reported. There were many red dots. "They still have not asked for help," she said quietly. Her first officer, Captain Scott Bradley, stood beside her. He was 35 years old, tall and thin, with calm eyes that rarely showed emotion. "Pride," Scott said. "They would rather watch their worlds burn than admit they were wrong." Katie nodded. She understood pride. She felt it herself. Part of her wanted to watch the Council suffer. They had treated humans like servants for 30 years. They had taken everything humans offered and given nothing in return. They deserved whatever was coming to them. But another part of Katie remembered the faces of the people she had protected. Not all of them had been cruel. Not all of them had looked down on humans. Some of them had been kind. Some of them had been friends. She thought about the Methrony children on Kesher 7, dying because no one knew how to make their medicine. She thought about the Velthary farmers on Tessix 4, watching their crops die because no one could fix their machines. These people had done nothing wrong. They were not the ones who had voted against humanity. "How long do we wait?" Katie asked. Scott did not have an answer. On Kesher 7, a young Methrony girl named Talia sat in her school and thought about her human teacher, Grace Patterson. Talia was 14 years old now, no longer a child but not yet an adult. She remembered how Grace had taught her to read human writing. She remembered how Grace had saved her school from a reactor meltdown 3 years ago, running into a burning building when everyone else ran away. Grace had not waited for permission. She had not asked for payment. She had simply seen people in danger and decided to help them. Talia went to the library and began searching through old records. She wanted to understand why the Council had sent the humans away. She wanted to understand what the Council was so afraid of. What she found changed everything. The records showed that humans had volunteered for every dangerous mission. They had taken the jobs no one else wanted. They had worked longer hours for less pay. They had died in greater numbers than any other species in Council service, and they had done it all without complaint. They had done it because they believed it was the right thing to do. Talia kept reading. She found stories of human doctors who had given their own blood to save alien patients. Human soldiers who had thrown themselves on grenades to protect alien civilians. Human engineers who had worked themselves to death to keep alien stations running. The Council had not rejected a species of primitive savages. They had rejected a species of heroes. Talia began writing. She did not know who would read her words, but she knew she had to try. Someone had to tell the truth. Someone had to make the Council understand what they had lost. She finished her report and sent it to every news channel she could find. Then she sat back and waited. The response came faster than she expected. Messages poured in from every corner of Council space. Ordinary people who had worked with humans. Ordinary people who had been saved by humans. Ordinary people who were only now beginning to understand the truth. For the first time since the Exodus, the citizens of the Council began to demand answers from their leaders. The leaders did not want to give them. 1 year after the humans left, the war began. The Corvex Dominion had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. Their emperor, a massive creature with 4 arms and skin like black stone, had studied the Council for decades. He knew their strengths. He knew their weaknesses. And he knew that their greatest weakness was now gone. The humans had been the shield that protected Council space. They had been the sword that struck down enemies. Without them, the Council was soft and slow and weak. The Emperor gave the order, and 1,000 warships crossed the border. The first world to fall was Tessix Prime, a major trading hub. The Council had only 3 ships defending it. The battle lasted less than an hour. When it was over, 5 million people were prisoners of the Dominion. The second world was Orient 6, a mining colony. The third was Vest Station, a medical center. The fourth, fifth, and sixth fell within days of each other. Council of Vreth stood in the Great Hall of Aethar Prime and watched the war map change color. Blue territories turned red. Safe zones became danger zones. The galaxy he had known his entire life was being eaten alive. "We must call for reinforcements," another counselor said. His name was Torith, and he represented the Vothari. His voice shook with fear. "From where?" Vreth asked. His voice was cold and sharp. "We sent our best soldiers away. We told them they were not wanted. Do you think they will come back now that we need them?" The council chamber fell silent. No one wanted to say what they were all thinking. No one wanted to admit that they had made a terrible mistake. Councillor Yenna, the small Tazari who had voted in favor of humanity, finally spoke. "We must ask them," she said. "We must admit our error and ask for help. It is our only chance." "They will refuse," Vreth said. "Perhaps," Yenna replied. "But we must try. What other choice do we have?" Vreth looked at the war map one more time. Red was spreading like a disease. In 6 months, maybe less, the Dominion would reach Aethar Prime itself. The Council would fall. Everything they had built over thousands of years would be destroyed. He swallowed his pride. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. Send the message, he said quietly. Tell the humans we are sorry. Tell them we were wrong. Tell them we need their help. The message was sent that night. It traveled across empty space, through regions where no ships flew anymore. To the edge of the galaxy, where the human fleet waited. It arrived at Admiral Katie Marsh's ship 3 days later. Katie read the message in her private quarters. The words were formal and polite, but she could feel the desperation behind them. The council was begging. The proud, ancient council that had looked down on humanity for 30 years was finally on its knees. She should have felt happy. She should have felt victorious. Instead, she just felt tired that she called a meeting of her senior officers. They gathered in the conference room. 12 men and women who had led humanity into exile. They sat around a table and waited for her to speak. The council has asked for our help, Katie said. She placed the message on the table so everyone could see it. They are losing the war. They want us to come back. The room exploded with voices. Some officers were angry. Some were confused. Some were laughing at the irony of it all. Commander Ben Torres raised his hand for silence. When the room was quiet, he spoke. What do we do? He asked. His voice was calm, but his eyes were hard. Do we help them? After everything they did to us? They treated us like animals, Lieutenant Megan Shaw said. Her hands were clenched into fists. They used us and threw us away. Why should we risk our lives for them? Because innocent people are dying, a voice said from the end of the table. It belonged to Dr. Nathan Cole, the chief medical officer. He was an old man with white hair and gentle eyes. The council made the decision, not the farmers and children who are suffering because of it. Nathan is right, another voice said. This one belonged to engineer Amy Lynn, a small woman with quick hands and a sharp mind. I worked with Valkyrie engineers for 10 years. Most of them were good people. They did not vote against us. They did not even know about the vote until it was over. The debate continued for hours. Voices rose and fell. Old wounds were reopened. Old anger spilled out. Finally, Katie raised her hand. Enough, she said. We will put it to a vote. Every ship in the fleet will have a say. This is too important for one person to decide. The vote took 3 days. Messages went back and forth across the fleet. Soldiers talked to soldiers. Families talked to families. The question was simple. Should humanity go back? When the votes were counted, the result was close. 53% said yes. 47% said no. Katie looked at the numbers and nodded slowly. It is decided, she said. We are going back. On the refugee station Kesher 7, Talia heard the news and felt tears running down her face. She had spent months telling everyone who would listen about what the humans had done for the galaxy. She had been called a fool and a dreamer. She had been told that the humans would never forgive what had been done to them, that they were coming back. She found a quiet corner of the station and sat down. Around her, refugees from a dozen worlds huddled together in fear. They had lost their homes, their families, their hope. They did not know that help was on the way. Talia pulled out her communication device and recorded a message. My name is Talia Vey, she said. I am a historian. I have spent the last year studying humanity, trying to understand who they are and what they mean to our galaxy. Today, I finally understand. She paused to collect her thoughts. The humans are not coming back because they forgive us. They are not coming back because they owe us anything. They are coming back because they cannot watch people suffer and do nothing. It is not in their nature. It is not who they are. She ended the recording and sent it out into the dark. She did not know if anyone would hear it. She did not know if it would matter. But somewhere out in space, Admiral Katie Marsh listened to the words of a young Methrony girl and felt something warm in her chest. It was hope. It was purpose. It was the reason she had joined the Navy in the first place. All ships, Katie said into her communicator. Set course for Council space. Maximum speed. Behind her, the human fleet turned as one. 37 warships and 200 support vessels. The largest human military force ever assembled. They were going home. And this time, they were going as equals. The Dominion had no idea what was coming. The journey back to Council space took 2 weeks. For the humans on board the fleet, it was the longest 2 weeks of their lives. Admiral Katie Marsh spent most of her time in her quarters, reading reports and planning strategy. She had maps spread across every surface. She had lists of enemy positions, fleet strengths, and supply routes. She had everything she needed to fight a war. But she also had something else. She had letters, thousands of them. Messages from aliens across the galaxy who had heard that the humans were coming back. Some were thank you notes from people who remembered human kindness. Some were apologies from people who had treated humans badly. Some were just simple pleas for help from people who had no one else to turn to. Katie read every single one. One letter came from a Belthery farmer on Tessex 4. His name was Karis, and he wrote about Paul Rivera, the human engineer who had built the irrigation systems on his world. He worked 16 hours a day for 3 years, Karis wrote. He never asked for anything in return. When he left, he tried to teach us how to maintain the machines, but we did not listen. We thought we knew better. We were wrong. Another letter came from a Methrony doctor on Kesha 7. Her name was Yeva, and she wrote about the human medical team that had served on her station. They gave blood to patients they'd never met, Yeva wrote. They stayed awake for days to save lives. When the medicine ran out, they found ways to make more from nothing. I did not understand how special they were until they were gone. Katie put down the letters and looked out the window at the stars. The fleet was moving at maximum speed, but it still felt too slow. Every minute they spent in hyperspace was a minute that innocent people were dying. Captain Scott Bradley knocked on her door. Admiral, he said, we are receiving a transmission from Counselor Vreth. Katie stood up and straightened her uniform. Put it through. Vreth's face appeared on the screen. He looked old. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had made a terrible mistake and was only now beginning to understand the cost. Admiral Marsh, Vreth said. His voice was softer than Katie remembered. On behalf of the Galactic Council, I wish to thank you for your response to our request for aid. Save your thanks, Katie said. Her voice was not cruel, but it was not warm either. We are not coming back for you. We are coming back for the people who need us. Vreth flinched slightly. I understand. Nevertheless, I wanted you to know that the Council has voted unanimously to grant humanity full membership status. You will have a seat among us. You will have equal voting rights. You will have everything you asked for. We asked for that 30 years ago, Katie said. You told us we were not ready. We were wrong. The words hung in the air between them. 3 simple words that had taken a year of war and death to speak. Katie nodded slowly. We will discuss the details after the war is over. Right now, I need tactical information. Ship positions, enemy numbers, civilian locations. Everything you have. Of course, Vreth said. I will send everything immediately. The transmission ended. Katie sat down and started reading the new data. The situation was worse than she had thought. The Dominion controlled nearly a third of Council space. Millions of people were living under occupation. The Council fleet had been reduced to less than half its original size, but Katie had something the Council did not have. She had humans. On the lower decks of the Iroh, soldiers prepared for battle. They checked weapons, tested armor, and said goodbye to loved ones through video messages. They knew that many of them would not come home. Commander Ben Torres walked through the barracks, talking to his men. He stopped by a young soldier named Danny Wright, a kid who had just turned 19. "You scared?" Ben asked. Danny thought about the question. "A little," he admitted, "but not of dying. I am scared of letting people down." Ben smiled. "That is the right thing to be scared of. Hold on to that feeling. It will keep you honest." In the medical bay, Dr. Nathan Cole was training Methrony nurses on human medical techniques. They had requested the training weeks ago, hoping to be useful when the fighting started. Human blood can be given to almost any carbon-based species in an emergency, Nathan explained. It is not a perfect match, but it will keep someone alive long enough to get proper treatment. One of the nurses raised her hand. "Why would humans give their blood to strangers?" Nathan smiled. "Because we have plenty of it, and because it is the right thing to do." In the engineering section, Amy Lynn was working on a new type of shield generator. She had designed it herself, using ideas borrowed from 3 different alien technologies. It should not work, but it did. That was the human way. A Sathara engineer named Vex was helping her. He had joined the human fleet 2 months ago, one of the few aliens who had followed humanity into exile. "Why did you come with us?" Amy asked him one day. "You could have stayed with the council. You would have been safe." Vex thought about the question. "I have worked with humans for 15 years, he said. "I have seen you do impossible things. I have seen you save lives at the cost of your own. I did not want to be part of a galaxy that rejected people like that." Amy reached out and squeezed his hand. No words were needed. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Tessix system. Ahead of them, the Dominion had assembled its largest force, 500 warships, arranged in a defensive formation around Tessix Prime. Admiral Katie Marsh stood on the bridge of the Iron Will and looked at the enemy fleet. It was the largest army she had ever seen, the largest threat humanity had ever faced. Behind her, the human fleet waited. 37 warships and 200 support vessels. Small compared to the enemy, but crewed by men and women who had spent their entire lives preparing for moments like this. Katie opened a channel to all ships. "This is Admiral Marsh. We have traveled a long way to be here. We have been told that we are too young, too primitive, too aggressive to sit among the elder races. Today, we prove them wrong." She paused. The bridge was silent. "We do not fight for revenge. We do not fight for glory. We fight because there are innocent people behind those enemy lines who need our help. We fight because that is what humans do." She took a deep breath. "All ships, prepare for battle. Let us show them what we are made of." The human fleet moved forward. The war for the galaxy had begun. The Battle of Tessix Prime would be remembered for 1,000 years. It began at dawn, local time, when the human fleet crossed the invisible line that marked Dominion territory. 500 enemy warships turned to face them. Weapons powered up. Shields flickered to life. The Carvex commander, a giant named Varth, watched the small human fleet approach and laughed. "They bring 30 ships against 500, he said to his officers. "This will be over quickly." He was right about one thing. It would be over quickly, but not in the way he expected. Captain Scott Bradley led the first attack. His ship, the Defiant Heart, shot forward at impossible speed. The Dominion ships tried to track it, but it moved too fast, too unpredictably. It danced between enemy vessels like a leaf in a storm. "All weapons, target their communication array," Scott ordered. "If we can blind them, we can beat them." The Defiant Heart opened fire. Missiles streaked across the darkness. Lasers cut through enemy shields. The Dominion flagship shuddered as its communication tower exploded in a ball of fire. Vorath roared with anger. "All ships, destroy that vessel." 100 Dominion ships turned toward the defiant heart, but before they could fire, the rest of the human fleet attacked. Admiral Katie Marsh had studied Carvex tactics for years. She knew they fought in formation, every ship supporting the ships beside it. Break the formation, and the whole fleet would fall apart. Task Force Alpha, hit their left flank, she ordered. Task Force Beta, circle around and cut off their retreat. Task Force Gamma, protect the civilian transports. The human ships moved like parts of a single machine. They did not hesitate. They did not second-guess. They trusted their admiral, and she trusted them. The battle raged for hours. Ships burned. People died. The darkness of space filled with fire and smoke and screaming metal. On the refugee station Kesher 7, Talia watched the battle on a small screen in the corner of a crowded room. She had never seen a real battle before. She had never understood what war truly meant. Now she understood. Now she saw humans dying to protect people who had rejected them. She saw ships sacrificing themselves to save stations full of strangers. She saw courage that she had only read about in books. The battle turned when Lieutenant Megan Shaw made her choice. The Dominion flagship had broken through the human lines. It was heading straight for Kesher 7, its weapons charged and ready. 10 million refugees were about to die. McGann was piloting a small transport ship, evacuating wounded soldiers from a damaged cruiser. She saw the flagship approaching. She saw its weapons targeting the station. She knew what she had to do. "All passengers brace for impact," she said to the intercom. Her voice was calm and steady. She turned her ship toward the flagship. She pushed the engines to maximum. She flew directly into the path of the flagship's main weapon, disrupting its targeting systems at the last possible moment. The weapon fired, but it missed the station by 1,000 meters. Kesher 7 was saved. Megan's ship was torn apart by the blast. She was thrown into space, her suit damaged, her oxygen running low. She closed her eyes and waited for the end. But the end did not come. A Metheny rescue ship found her floating in the wreckage. They pulled her aboard and rushed her to the medical bay. The doctors worked for 6 hours to save her life. When Megan woke up, she found Talia sitting beside her bed. "You saved us," Talia said. Her eyes were filled with tears. "You saved all of us." Megan tried to smile, but it hurt too much. "That is what we do," she whispered. The battle ended 3 hours later. The Dominion fleet retreated, broken and bleeding. Commander Vorath escaped in a damaged shuttle. His dreams of conquest destroyed in his personal log, which would later be captured by human intelligence. He wrote these words: "We forgot what humans are. They are not the strongest. They are not the fastest. But they will die for strangers. What defense exists against a species willing to sacrifice everything for beings not their own?" The liberation of Council space took another 6 months. Human ships pushed forward, system by system, world by world. The Dominion fought back, but their heart was no longer in it. They had seen what humans could do. They did not want to see it again. On the day the last Dominion forces surrendered, Admiral Katie Marsh stood on the bridge of the Iron Will and watched the enemy flag come down. She did not celebrate. She did not cheer. She just felt tired and sad and grateful to be alive. 3 years later, Ambassador Daniel Price took his seat on the Galactic Council. The ceremony was simple and quiet. There were no speeches, no parades, no celebrations. Just an old man sitting down in a chair that should have been his decades ago. Council of Reth welcomed him personally. The Sithara counselor had aged greatly since the war. His scales were dull. His eyes were tired. He had lost many friends and family to the Dominion invasion. "I owe you an apology," Reth said. "Not just for the vote, but for everything. For 30 years of blindness. For 30 years of arrogance." Daniel shook his hand. "Apology accepted," he said. And he meant it. In the gallery above, Talia sat beside Grace Patterson. The human teacher had returned after the war, taking up her old position at the school on Kesher 7. She was older now, with gray in her hair and lines around her eyes, but her smile was still warm. "Do you think things will be different now?" Talia asked. Grace thought about the question. "I do not know," she admitted, "but I hope so. I think we have all learned something important." "What is that?" Grace smiled. "That strength is not about power. It is about what you are willing to do for others." Outside the council chamber, human and alien ships flew together. On 100 worlds, humans worked side by side with species who had once looked down on them. In 1,000 hospitals, humans treated patients from every corner of the galaxy. The council had learned an expensive lesson. They had learned that the small, fragile, short-lived creatures they had dismissed were the backbone of their civilization. They had learned that courage was not about living forever, but about being willing to die for something greater than yourself. They had learned what humans were: not the strongest, not the fastest, not the oldest or the wisest, just the ones who cared, and in the end. That made all the difference. On a quiet evening, years after the war, Admiral Katie Marsh sat alone on the observation deck of her ship. The stars stretched out before her, endless and beautiful. She thought about everyone she had lost, everyone she had saved, everyone who had followed her into the unknown. She thought about the council and how they had changed. She thought about humanity and how far they had come. She thought about the future and all the challenges that still lay ahead. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Commander Ben Torres. "The council is requesting your presence at a ceremony tomorrow," he said. "They want to give you a medal." Katie laughed. "Another medal? I am running out of room on my uniform." Ben smiled. "They also want to name a star system after you." Katie stood up and looked at the stars one more time. "Tell them thank you," she said. "But I did not do this for medals or star systems." "Then why did you do it?" Katie thought about the question for a long moment. Then she answered, "Because it was the right thing to do." She walked out of the observation deck and back to work. There was always more work to be done, more people to help, more wrongs to make right. That was the human way, and the galaxy was better for it.